The night of the blood moon ceremony was the most important night in the kingdom of Blackthorn Ridge. Every wolf, young and old, gathered in the great stone courtyard beneath a sky painted red by the rising moon. Torches burned along the walls, and drums echoed through the crowd like a heartbeat. Tonight, the Alpha King would meet his fated mate, the woman chosen by the ancient bond magic that had guided their kind for 1,000 years. King Alaric Blackthorn stood at the center of the courtyard. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of storm clouds, and a presence that made even seasoned warriors lower their gaze. He had ruled since his father's death 3 years earlier, and in that time he had built Blackthorn Ridge into the strongest territory in the northern lands. He was proud of his strength, and prouder still of his pack. Tonight, tradition demanded he claim his Luna, the woman fate had chosen to stand beside him. The crowd fell silent as the ceremony began. An old priestess raised her arms and called on the moon to reveal the bond. A soft golden light spread across the courtyard, moving through the gathered wolves like a searching hand. It passed over warriors, healers, and elders, until it stopped in front of a young woman standing near the back of the crowd. Her name was Elena Voss. She had grown up outside the Packlands, raised by a mother who kept to herself and rarely spoke of the past. Elena had only returned to Blackthorn Ridge 2 years ago, after her mother's death, and she had never quite felt like she belonged. She wore plain clothes, had no family name of importance, and carried herself with a quiet humility that some mistook for weakness. When the golden light touched her palm, a crescent moon mark appeared, glowing softly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The priestess called her forward, and Elena walked slowly toward the king, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Alaric looked at her, and his expression did not soften. He saw a woman with no known lineage, no impressive rank, and no visible strength. He saw someone who did not look like the powerful Luna his pack deserved. Whispers spread through the crowd, some curious, some mocking. "This cannot be right," Alaric said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "She is nothing. She has no place standing beside me." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She had not asked for this. She had not wanted to be chosen. But to be rejected so publicly, so coldly, in front of hundreds of watching eyes, cut deeper than she expected. "I reject this bond," Alaric said, turning away from her. "Find her a place among the servants. She is not fit to be Luna of this pack." The crowd murmured, some in shock, some already beginning to whisper cruel things about the strange girl with no family name. Elena stood alone in the center of the courtyard, the golden light fading from her palm, leaving only silence and shame behind. She did not cry, though she wanted to. She held her chin up, even as her chest ached, and walked away from the courtyard without a word. In the weeks that followed, Elena was given a small room near the kitchens and put to work as a servant. She scrubbed floors, carried firewood, and prepared meals for the very pack that had watched her be humiliated. Some of the kitchen staff were kind to her, offering quiet sympathy, but many others treated her with the same contempt the king had shown. They called her the rejected one, or worse, when they thought she could not hear. Elena endured it all with a quiet strength that surprised even herself. She had learned long ago, from her mother, that dignity was not something others could take from you unless you let them. Every night, she lay in her small bed and thought of her mother's words. "No matter what happens, Elena, remember who you are. Your worth was never given to you by anyone else, and it cannot be taken away either." She did not fully understand what her mother meant, not yet. Strange things began happening around her, small at first. When she walked past the kennels, the wolves inside would grow quiet and still, watching her with an intensity that unsettled the guards. When she worked near the moonlit garden at night, the plants seemed to lean toward her, and the air around her felt warmer, calmer. The pack elders, wise in the old ways, began to notice these small signs, though none of them spoke openly about what they suspected. One elder in particular, a woman named Old Marta, who had served the Blackthorn family for decades, began watching Elena closely. Marta remembered stories from her own grandmother, tales of a bloodline thought lost to time, a line said to carry the blood of the first wolf, the original spirit from which all werewolves descended. It was said that when a true descendant of the first wolf appeared, The moon itself would recognize her, and the ancient power within her would awaken when it was needed most. Marta said nothing to Elena directly, not wanting to burden her with a legend that might not even be true. But she began to watch over the girl quietly, offering her kindness where others offered scorn, and paying close attention to the strange calm that seemed to follow Elena wherever she went. Elena, for her part, tried not to dwell on the whispers or the strange occurrences. She focused on her work, on surviving each day with her dignity intact. She missed her mother deeply, and there were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable, when she wondered if she would ever find a place where she truly belonged. But she never let herself sink into despair for long. She had promised her mother she would be strong, and she intended to keep that promise. Months passed. Life in Blackthorn Ridge continued, and Alaric ruled with the same confidence and pride he always had, though there were moments, quiet and unspoken, when he found his thoughts drifting to the woman he had rejected. He told himself it did not matter. Aluna needed to be strong, respected, someone the pack could look up to. Elena, in his eyes, had shown him nothing to suggest she was any of those things. He did not know, could not know, that her strength had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. That moment came on a cold autumn night, when the peace of Blackthorn Ridge was shattered without warning. A rival kingdom, the Ravenwood Pack, had long resented Blackthorn Ridge's growing power. Under the cover of darkness, their warriors launched a surprise attack, moving swiftly through the outer forests, before the Blackthorn sentries could raise the alarm. By the time the horns finally sounded, the enemy was already at the gates. Chaos erupted throughout the territory. Warriors scrambled to arm themselves, villagers ran for shelter, and the sound of battle echoed through the once peaceful grounds. Alaric fought at the front lines, his strength matched by few, but the Ravenwood forces had chosen their moment well. Blackthorn Ridge was caught unprepared, and even the king's great strength could not hold back the tide alone. In the kitchens, Elena heard the horns and the screams, and felt her heart seize with fear. She had no weapon, no training in battle, but she could not simply hide while others fought and suffered. She ran outside, weaving through panicked crowds, trying to help however she could, guiding frightened children and elders toward safety. As she rounded a corner near the outer wall, she saw a group of Ravenwood warriors closing in on a cluster of terrified villagers who had nowhere left to run. Among them was a small child, no older than 5, frozen in fear as an enemy wolf advanced. Something inside Elena broke open in that moment. Not fear, but something older, deeper, something that had been sleeping inside her for her entire life. Without thinking, she stepped between the child and the advancing warrior, her arms spread wide, her voice tearing from her throat, in a sound that was not quite human and not quite wolf. The moonlight above seemed to answer her call. It poured down brighter than before, wrapping around her like a second skin. Her eyes turned a brilliant silver, glowing with an ancient light. The ground beneath her feet trembled slightly, and the wind itself seemed to still, as though the world was holding its breath. The Ravenwood warriors froze, some instinctively stepping back, their wolf instincts recognizing something far older and more powerful than themselves. Elena felt a surge of strength unlike anything she had ever known, as though every wolf that had ever lived was somehow present within her, lending her their power. She moved without fully understanding what she was doing, her body responding to instincts buried deep in her blood. She called out, and nearby Blackthorn wolves, wounded and exhausted, felt new strength flow into their limbs. She raised her hand, and the earth itself seemed to shift, creating barriers that slowed the enemy's advance. The moonlight bent and gathered around her, illuminating the battlefield and revealing enemy positions hidden in the shadows. Word spread quickly across the battlefield. The rejected one was fighting, and she fought like nothing anyone had ever seen. Alaric, battling near the gates, felt the shift in the air before he understood its cause. He turned and saw the light in the distance, saw the impossible sight of Elena standing tall and glowing, wolves rallying around her, the tide of battle turning in Blackthorn Ridge's favor. He fought his way toward her, his mind racing, disbelief in something else, something like shame, rising in his chest. By the time he reached her, the Ravenwood forces were already retreating, their commanders realizing they could not win against a power they did not understand. The battlefield fell into an exhausted, stunned silence, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and the crackling of dying torches. Elena stood in the center of it all, the glow slowly fading from her eyes, her body trembling with the effort of what she had just done. Around her, warriors who had once mocked her, servants who had once scorned her, and elders who had once doubted her, all began to kneel, one by one, their heads bowed in recognition of something ancient and undeniable. Old Marta stepped forward first, tears in her eyes, and knelt before Elena with a reverence she had never shown another soul. "The first wolf," she whispered, "she has returned." Alaric stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, watching as his entire pack knelt before the woman he had rejected only months before. Shame flooded through him, heavy and undeniable. He had looked at her and seen nothing, had judged her worth by appearances and lineage, and he had been wrong in every possible way. He walked forward slowly, kneeling before her as the others had, his pride set aside for the first time in his life. "I was wrong," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I rejected you without ever knowing who you truly were. I ask for your forgiveness, and I ask you to stand beside me as my Luna, as you were always meant to be." Elena looked at him for a long moment, exhaustion and quiet strength mingling in her expression. She thought of the humiliation she had endured, the lonely nights, the whispered insults, the months of feeling unwanted and unseen. She thought of her mother's words, the promise she had made to herself, to never let her worth be defined by anyone else's judgment. "You rejected me when you thought I had nothing to offer," she said softly, but her voice carried across the silent crowd. "I have not changed since that night. The power was always within me. You simply did not see it, because you were never truly looking." She paused, taking a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her. "I do not need your title to know my own worth. I do not need to be chosen to belong. But this pack, these people, they need someone who will protect them, not because of a bond, but because it is right." She looked out at the kneeling crowd, at the warriors and villagers and elders who had once doubted her, now looking to her with something like awe and hope. "I will stand with Blackthorn Ridge," she said. "Not as your Luna by mating bond, but as one who will protect this pack because I choose to, because it is who I am." Alaric nodded slowly, understanding, for perhaps the first time, that respect had to be earned, not simply claimed by title or birthright. He rose to his feet, no longer looking at her as a king looking down at someone beneath him, but as an equal, someone whose strength and heart had proven far greater than his own judgment had ever allowed him to see. In the days that followed, Elena's place in Blackthorn Ridge changed entirely. She was no longer a servant scrubbing floors in the kitchen, nor was she merely a rejected mate living in the shadow of the king's decision. She became something new, something the pack had not seen in 1,000 years, a protector, chosen not by ceremony or bond, but by her own strength, her own choices, and the ancient blood that ran quietly and powerfully through her veins. Alaric worked to rebuild what his pride had broken, slowly earning back a measure of trust and respect from the woman he had once dismissed. Their relationship, whatever it would become, was no longer built on fate or tradition, but on something more honest, something both of them would have to choose, day by day, moment by moment. Elena walked through Blackthorn Ridge now with her head held high, no longer the rejected one, but a woman who had discovered, in the darkest moment of her life, exactly who she was meant to be. And every wolf who looked upon her, from the youngest pup to the oldest elder, understood one simple truth. True worth was never something given by another, but something that lived quietly within, waiting for the moment to shine.